Okay, what's up? It's the Metal Ireland podcast. Now, just before we start, I've got a word from our kind sponsors. They're O'Reilly's Bar and Music Venue in Banbridge, County Down. It's an established pub in the area, but the thing is, they're now keen to take bookings from metal and rock bands, and they want you to know about it. So the venue, O'Reilly's venue, has recently had a major refurbishment, and it now has top-notch facilities for both local and touring bands, as well as a great room for the gigs themselves. They're very close to the main motorway between Dublin and Belfast, and so that's about 90 minutes up the road maybe from Dublin, about 40 minutes away from Belfast in a straight line. So it's an ideal stop for many bands interested in doing a run of gigs. Now the guy you need to talk to at O'Reilly's is Kevin Smith. Talk to him about booking your act, and you can get his details on the Metal Ireland venues section. Go there now, just take a look for O'Reilly's and you'll see all the info. So they're supporting Metal Ireland, they're supporting local acts, and they really want to make metalers and the rockers feel welcome. So we're happy to support them too. So book your band in there and see what they've got to offer, and I hope O'Reilly show you a good time and give you a great gig. I'm sure they will. Okay, so welcome to episode 14, where we're talking to a guy from Northern Ireland who's in a band that have gotten insanely popular and are quite literally touring the world, all very much under the radar as far as maybe Ireland and the UK are concerned. I'm talking about a band called Alestorm. Now, whatever you think of their pirate metal, or so they call it, they're doing seriously well right now, really, really well. And it turns out that their drummer is also from Banbridge in County Down, which is neat. That's the same place as O'Reilly's. He's called Peter Alcorn. He's been drumming for Alestorm for some time now. And just to give you some idea of how popular this band has become, when I talked to him a few weeks back, he was just off the plane from having played a gig in Japan and was about to embark on the band's tour of America. So it really, really is nuts.
Japan was absolutely insane. I've never seen anything like it. It was pretty much every stereotype rolled into one. We had no clue what was going on most of the time. There was very little English, but some of the most polite people you've ever met in your life, and just complete culture shock. But it was completely wonderful. Yeah. We were. The biggest difficulty half the time was trying to find somewhere to eat. Nobody spoke a word of English, but the crowds were really, really enthusiastic and cool. It was something of a bit of an old ambition of mine to play out there, I guess. It was sort of like one of the last things I hadn't really ticked off the list, because we've done other stuff like South America, the US, and things like that, and all around Europe. But Japan was always one that just seemed really cool to me to go out and play, so that was quite something to tick off.
Where did you actually play in Japan?
We did 2 shows. It was Osaka and Tokyo, and then we were lucky enough we got a few days off to spend in Tokyo, seeing some of the sites and doing a bit of tourism, which is incredibly rare in this job, actually.
It's amazing. It's one thing for a Dublin band to book a gig in Cork or even like at Liverpool or Leeds or something. How does it come to be that you end up playing on the other side of the planet? I mean, Alestorm are actually that popular now that you can wind up playing in Japan. I mean, how did that even come about? Most metal bands won't do that.
It's completely baffling to me. I mean, I guess it's partially because we're one of these bands that's grown up through decent enough presence on the internet, so that's easy to sort of spread the name around. I mean, the band started out, I guess, through a lot of talking forums and people sharing things. But I think a simple enough answer, I guess, would be our manager is actually a guy. He plays in a band called Cataclysm, and they'd already been out there with the same promoter, so I guess about a year later he set us up with the same guy and set us out. But we had no idea what to expect. I guess they didn't either. So
it went down well anyway. Pirate metal going down well in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very good now.
I mean, just looking at your tour list from last year, and indeed your upcoming list from this year, your list is insane. Your list of gigging is absolutely mind-boggling. Were you ever at home last year?
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot more time off than you'd imagine. It's completely ridiculous, the schedule. I think our last European tour there was, well, we went all through Europe and then the UK and Ireland, and it was something like 43 shows in 45 days, which was quite nuts, and it takes its toll on you mentally and physically. But we after that we'd probably spend, you could easily spend 3 months doing nothing, and then a month and a half solidly playing shows every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking down the list here of what you've got coming up for America now in January and February. So I guess you're really just about to head off at the end of this month. But I mean, you are crisscrossing. I'm just looking down the list here: Tampa, Charlotte, Springfield, Trenton, New York, Quebec, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Cleveland, all the way right down to Fort Worth, Texas, and Austin, Texas. I mean, how many thousand miles? It's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully we don't have to do any of the driving, because that would be ludicrous.
So you're kind of past that point now. You're very much the full production on the road.
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of hit a point now where, we did one headliner last year in the US. That was the first time sort of doing a full headline tour, and we brought a very skeleton crew out, and that we had a merchandiser and our front of house guy who's also tour managing. But we're sort of trying to step it up now and have, bring lights and additional techs and things, just sort of bring it that step further in professionalism that people sort of expect to see when they're going to see a touring band who's doing this many shows.
Yeah, I mean, people, ordinary gig-goers will often forget that a lot of that headache can actually come down to you as 5 individuals in a band who are just trying to up your game, up your show, and you're suddenly responsible for delivering this production that we all expect, as you rightly say, to see. I mean, did you ever? How hard is that for you as a drummer to deal with? All these added elements of production.
Well, it's interesting. You generally get a feeling like you had certain times where you just noticed, oh wait, I'm actually part of something quite cool here. Like, I remember the first time we ever played with a lighting engineer. I think we were 2012 in the UK, I guess. We brought a lighting guy for the first time, and we suddenly had these moving heads and strobes going off at cued moments, and I suddenly thought, actually, this is completely fantastic. You suddenly feel like you're a proper band. Up until that point, it was, you always just kind of feel like a bunch of jokers, and you got a bit too far.
It's interesting, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, when was the moment that you felt you became the kind of band that you used to go and buy a ticket for, a real band, not just a gigging band doing well, or suddenly that you got signed and you were playing clubs? But when was the moment, and maybe you've already answered it, but when was the moment that you felt, yes, I am now that band? Or do you ever feel like that?
Oh God, I don't know if I'd buy a ticket to see me, but it's hard to say, because there have just been so many weird moments where I've sort of noticed myself doing things. Like, remember last summer we played the main stage at Graft, and I've been to Graft numerous times as a fan, watching the main stage, going, oh my God, that must be ridiculous to play on. And in fairness, it is actually completely ridiculous. It's total sort of, just have to take a step back from it and go, what the hell am I actually doing here?
It is amazing, and of course probably the single most ridiculous thing you've ever played is the amazing 70,000 tons of metal. Most of us, well, but for a start, for those who don't know, this is a cruise ship anchored off Florida that goes on a bit of a tour with hundreds of metal bands on it for like a 4-day festival. But that is probably the pinnacle. It may even be like peak heavy metal. To play a cruise ship with 100 other metal bands. What was that like?
Yeah, that was a bit of a highlight. I still actually got the clipping upstairs from, I think Metal Hammer did a feature on it. I had the back of my head on the outside of the plastic cover around the magazine. It was quite funny. That was absolutely ludicrous. I mean, there was a write-up in that magazine that said, I think they mentioned that we were sort of one of the bands sort of born to play that gig, because I guess it just made sense with the whole pirate theme when we were both in the Caribbean. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go down, but we played on the pool deck at about 1 in the afternoon. I think we had pretty much the same crowd that Nightwish had headlining the thing. Like, it was completely packed. I'm not sure if anybody else had the same number of people coming out to see it. It was completely insane for us.
I mean, the whole setup is quite preposterous. I mean, one thinks of, several thousand hairy, sweaty metlers on a boat drinking and, headbanging and stuff. I don't know if it would be my thing, but just tell us about the mechanics of it. I mean, what is it like being on that boat and trying to play a gig on a massive boat?
Well, I mean, it's essentially one of the exact same cruise ships that old couples go off on around the rest of the year, but they've just sort of decked it out with a festival. So there's a restaurant which is everything's sort of completely included in your ticket apart from alcoholic drinks. You can go to a restaurant and it's absolutely wonderful food, and you can go somewhere else and get pizzas and whatever else. And the whole thing's huge. There's a gym on board. There was a casino the last time. It was just absolutely massive. But then there was numerous stages all over the place. So it is actually very interesting just to see certain bands in a setting you never would have before.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of feels like the next possible thing to do after that is to play the Moon or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's probably become quite a trend now that there's a bunch of other people are sort of getting in the act and trying to put on festivals in daft places now. I think there's a couple of other cruises maybe started up.
It could be that metalers are getting a bit older and have a bit more disposable income now and want life experiences as much as they want to go to old sweaty clubs.
Yeah, I could have sworn I saw something the other day about a festival in the ski resort, which in my mind is the most middle class thing I've ever heard. So
well, I think that's where it's going.
Yeah.
So you're on this extremely tiring tour schedule. I mean, how do you mentioned there that there's actually a lot of downtime, and it is a bit of a classic complaint of musicians that there's very little to do all day until the 2 or 3 hours that you're on stage. But talk us through it. I mean, you are on a punishing schedule. That's for sure. What's it like with the guys in the band?
Well, you mean during the day? What do we do?
Pretty much.
It's I don't know. It'd be quite easy just to spend all day drinking and be a complete stereotype, but try to be remotely constructive with my days. But I myself try to be quite regimented about doing certain amounts of warm-ups and practice routines every day on tour, because well, for example, on the last tour I messed up my wrist and I actually couldn't play for about 3 days, and the drum tech had to jump in and fill in, which was incredibly strange actually watching my own band. But,
it's a pretty stressful situation, I'd imagine.
Oh, incredibly, because I had no idea if it was going to get better. So I just sort of arrested it for about 3 days and was dumping it into horrifically freezing buckets of ice, and trying to keep it there for about 15 minutes at a time until hypothermia nearly set in. And thankfully it came back and it was fine thereafter, but yeah, very stressful at the time.
I mean, I suppose I asked you earlier about when was the moment that you knew that you were in, the real thing, the real band. I suppose maybe the other side of that is, when was the moment that you realised, oh God, this is actually a bit of a slog here. This is quite tough.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I was in the band I joined in March 2010, and it wasn't until around mid-September 2010 that I finally did like a full-on tour with a tour bus. Because before that we'd just done festival things, which was grand, but when you're actually in the tour bus thing, that's when the real routine hits in. And that, go to bed, wake up in the next city, possibly having a clue where you are, and just wash, rinse, repeat. And that was a tour with band Sabaton, and we were on the road for I think about 3 centuries. It went something like 50 something gigs, I think. which was, the first proper tour I'd done and probably still the longest. And I remember a couple of weeks into it thinking, God, is this for me? Is this absolutely insane? I don't think it's ever going to end. But we got through it, It was, some of those were pretty grim, especially when we were hitting some nastier parts of Europe that weren't so inclined to look after you so well.
Yeah, I mean, is it for you, do you think, long term? I mean, how long can you keep up that kind of schedule, do you think?
Oh, well, that's the thing. It's, I guess you got to get through a bunch of the support tours, and we were lucky enough. I managed to sort of avoid most of the really hard work with the band, I guess, because I basically jumped in after the previous drummer had been at it for a couple of years. And I think some of those points would have been very difficult because I essentially joined at the moment where it sort of became at the cusp of financially viable to do it. And because obviously we're, as you say, we're away far too much for us to, any of us to have proper jobs really, so it's a bit of a difficult situation. So yeah, I think it's getting easier now because, like I said, we've been hiring crew and the production values have gone up, but at the same time, the venues are going up and schedules are getting a little easier. Like, I think the last tour was the one I hired a drum tech on for the first time, and that completely saved me because every other tour before that I've been setting up my gear every day, and it takes an absolute age. Whereas, we've got a keyboard player who can sort of swan in and plug one thing in and he's done. Then sitting tinkering with bolts for about 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, wrecking your wrist, tightening things, and wrecking your fingers.
Yeah. Everything gets broken in the trailer overnight.
Yeah, or stolen. But one of the things, I mean, you mentioned there that actually the real legwork might have been done slightly before your time, but you're still, you're still putting in an awful lot of work to this. And I suppose the question sort of that comes to my mind is this what it takes now to be an even remotely successful metal band, i.e. to make it financially viable for you in the short and medium terms? Is this kind of legwork what it takes, or can you really do it with less work? Doesn't seem like it.
I can't really see any realistic way around it. I mean, I guess it's hard to complain because you get a chance to be a professional musician, and you can't exactly turn your nose up at doing a few too many gigs because most people tear your arm off to get the same chance. So at the same time, we're pretty grateful to get to do the thing. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of hard work involved, but at the same time, what the hell else would I be doing? I was studying to be an architect before this, and then I think I'd probably rather be playing drums,
Yeah, I mean, people. There's a lot has been said over the last few years about how labels have, with the decline in CD sales, labels have kind of muscled in on these 360-degree packages, merch, touring receipts, things like that. Obviously, I don't need to know the specifics or anything like that, but how have you guys been treated in that regard? Are you able to get the lion's share of whatever you do?
Well, I mean, probably going back to the previous question again, because I don't think anyone's really expecting to live off their album sales anymore. I guess it all comes down to merchandise, really. That's what's been keeping us going for a good while. And again, that just makes it double important that you play enough gigs to sell enough shirts and things like that. It's a pretty cynical side of the business. Because you notice, like, God, I've seen quite a few other bands who are clearly getting exploited by somebody and like playing far too many pointless gigs just because some guy's getting a percentage off the top of their fee. And I think we haven't been too bad in that regard. I think when I joined, before I joined, it had been worse. There were some problems where I think our label basically printed shirts and sold them, and the band had no right to do that. Whereas we went out and hired a manager, and manager renegotiated things to get make a better deal for us so that we could do our own merch, and that was probably the single most important thing for the fact that the band kept going.
And we hear a lot these days, certainly in the sort of scene back chat or whatever, but you kind of hear about venues now demanding their slice of the pie as well, which is a really awful and really crass and cynical situation. But have you fallen foul of venues wanting increasing cuts of your merch sales and things like that?
I wasn't even aware that was a new thing. Yeah, I've spotted it once or twice around Europe and the UK, but it's completely normal in the US. Pretty much everywhere wants a cut of your merch sales, and it makes this whole stupid song and dance where you hire a good merchandiser, and they know that they basically just have to lie to the venues about how much they've brought in or how much they've sold, and everybody does it, and everybody knows they're doing it, but it's a completely ludicrous situation. I don't know why it happens.
Well, it's greed, really, isn't it? I mean, it's just greed.
Because you'd like to think they'd have some sort of heart and go, well, actually, I'm probably aware this is the band's bread and butter here, but it's a slightly nasty situation. But as I say, there are sort of cunning ways around it, I guess.
Indeed. I mean, people, just to move on, people have no idea really how popular Alestorm actually are. I think in many ways the UK and Ireland are insulated in many ways from the trends of both continental Europe and maybe the rest of the world when it comes to tastes in metal. We are quite different, and maybe a bit more, not conservative, but just a bit different. But you guys, it's quite incredible just how big you are. Do you feel that you are maybe overlooked in the UK and Ireland?
I wouldn't say overlooked. I mean, we did really, really well on the last tour. I was shocked how many sellout gigs and stuff we had. We filled the Electric Ballroom about a month in advance, which was 1,150 or 1,200 people, which was completely shocking to me. But I think it's not so much that we're overlooked. The fan base is there, but I think it's the people who say organize festivals or do the press or basically do the billing for festivals or whatever. They have no sort of clue what stage we're at, and then we play a gig and all these people show up. So I guess it's just a kind of case of we've got to keep putting in the work, and eventually people will start to realize. I've played God knows how many festivals now where we've had some massive crowd, and then people the rest of the day don't even get half of the amount. It's kind of strange that nobody's taking notice, but yeah, I think slowly but surely we're getting there.
But are you suggesting then that is that massive crowd a result of the hundreds and hundreds of tiny gigs you guys have done in cities across basically the world, and they all will come to you at a festival, or is it that your name has a certain appeal at a festival? What's the reason?
I'm not sure now. I guess there must be some sort of appeal at a festival, because we're probably known as a party band, so it's probably good crack to go and have a drink along with our stuff. But I mean, we did a load of gigs in France on a previous tour. And there were lots of ones in small towns, and then this year I think we're doing the Hellfest thing. Well, I'm not sure if that's announced yet. Probably is.
It is now.
Yeah.
Listen, you mentioned there that people, see you as a bit of a good time band, good crack at the festival, and that's completely understandable. And of course, there's no doubt that you were born to play 70,000 tons, or indeed 70,000 tons was probably born to have you play. But, you have a shtick. Your band has a shtick. How important to a band is a shtick?
I mean, It's very strange. I mean, we've been a bit of keep getting pegged as this sort of gimmicky band. People are often completely confused that we don't dress up as pirates on stage, but it has always been very, very tongue in cheek. I think we do have a shtick, or quite gimmicky, I guess, but I think we sort of like to think we transcended a bit. Not.
I mean, I'm thinking to the likes of. I mean, we have the likes of Corplicani or Teresa's. People dressing up. Even Amon Amarth to a certain point. With their whole big comic book spreads and things like that. I just wonder how long that can last, or do you ever yearn to play more serious or more artistically expressive music? Because you're a very talented drummer. I do wonder, how long the sort of slight silliness can last, or by contrast, is that what sustains you?
I think it's probably because sustaining us, to be honest. We don't take ourselves too seriously, but I mean, we keep hearing this. I think it actually got referenced in the last album. People kept assuming we're going to run out of lyrics at some point, but to be honest, how important is the pirate thing? I mean, you could literally write a song about absolutely anything and stick in a daft metaphor about a ship, and suddenly it's a pirate song. I don't think we're that tied down to a musical style, say, that some of those other bands you mentioned might. I mean, Amon Amarth are very good at what they do, but it's pretty much set in stone what Amon Amarth sounds like now.
It's a very good metaphor.
Whereas I think we've got quite a lot of influences going on. Like the last album, the most recent one, Sunset, there's a lot more pop stuff going on in it.
Yeah, I have to say I heard a bit of Alice Cooper in it myself.
Yeah, well, there's technically a bit of Lady Gaga in there as well. But we have like definitely pop song structures, and but then the previous album we had that daft song at the end, the Death Throes of the Terror Squid, which had like DB punk and then blast beats and this big section, which I guess everyone seems to think sounds like Dimmu Borgir, just because had the symphonic keys in the background.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the last the review of Sunset that I did, I think the thing that was most apparent to me was a comparison perhaps to Tankard, which I'm sure you hear all the time because of the sort of beer swilling fun, but at the same time they will have the last laugh. I mean, they'll be there with the Cockroaches and people will still be enjoying Tankard's music in 20 years when Tankard are all 70 or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think people keep trying to write bands off too quickly, but if the demand for it's still there, it's not exactly going to go anywhere. Yeah. I mean, as long as people keep coming to our gigs, we're not going to stop doing it, It doesn't appear to be on the wane anytime soon. I think one of the problems that some bands have is that they maybe get too big too quickly and then they burn out. Whereas I think the sheer fact that we're doing so many shows and working our way up slowly and maybe getting where we need to be by word of mouth rather than having it shoved in everyone's faces is probably to our benefit.
Absolutely. We're coming up on half an hour, so I'm gonna close it. But thanks so much, Peter, for doing this. What is, you're a drummer. You're from Banbridge, I guess. You've made it to this awesome band, literally touring the world. What is your advice to those who feel they've got it in them to be in a touring band, and think they're ready to make that decision? What's your advice to them?
Oh God. It's a bit difficult because it involves a hell of a lot of luck to do with being in the right place at the right time. That's how I got there. I was messing around with local bands for ages. I was in this really twee folk metal band called Runecaster, and I happened to meet Gaz, the Alestorms bass player, through that. So a lot of it's got to be to do with being right place at the right time. One bit of advice is to have a backup plan, I would imagine. I'm fully intending going back to my degree should the pirate thing fall through at some point. But
should the pirate metal ship sink?
Yes, exactly.
So there you go. I don't think there's any danger of this particular ship sinking anytime soon. Alestorm doing really, really well, and drummer Peter Alcorn there really is finding himself in some pretty incredible places and doing some incredible things. That's everything. Till next time, for the next Metal Ireland podcast, when Lorcan and Archer will be back with a really cool interview that I can't wait to have him bring to you. So till then, check out O'Reilly's. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, O'Reilly's in Banbridge. Book your gig with them and start to get things moving down that direction. And we'll see you shortly for episode 15 of the Metal Ireland podcast. Goodbye.